Not only have we just landed another mission on Mars, which in itself is an extraordinary achievement, but with the Perseverance rover, NASA has landed by far its most sophisticated rover on the surface of Mars. And in fact, this is something of a dual mission, because not only have they just landed the Perseverance rover, but strapped on the underside of Perseverance is another craft, basically a drone called Ingenuity, which will hopefully make the first powered flight on another world.
Hello, and welcome to Different Conversations, where every week we have a different academic from the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences here at the University of Westminster, talking about their work, their research, what's interesting, what's exciting, and what's topical at the moment. And this week, I'm really pleased to welcome our first repeat guest from season one, our ever popular Professor Lewis Dartnell. Lewis, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much for having me back.
Oh, it's good to have you back. And it's especially good to have you back because when we had you on last time, there was specific parts of the conversation where I had to be like, that's so cool, and we're not going to talk about that. Because you're our professor of science communication, but you're also an active researcher into life on Mars, which is such a cool topic. So being as we've just had NASA plant Perseverance on the surface of Mars, being as we've got a European Space Agency rover coming up, which we're going to talk about, I wanted to talk to you about this. I wanted to ask you this. So I guess the first obvious question, how closely are you following along with Perseverance right now?
Yeah, it's phenomenally exciting, isn't it? That not only have we just landed another mission on Mars, which in itself is an extraordinary achievement, but with the Perseverance rover, NASA has landed by far its most sophisticated rover on the surface of another planet, on the surface of Mars. And in fact, this is something of a dual mission, because not only have they just landed the Perseverance rover, but strapped on the underside of Perseverance is another craft, basically a drone called Ingenuity, which will hopefully make the first powered flight on another world. So with this Mars 2020 mission, we're effectively getting 2 for 1 with the Perseverance rover and the Ingenuity drone, the helicopter they've sent to Mars. So it's for many reasons to do with the engineering of the landing, to do with the science equipment and instrumentation that's aboard Perseverance, and the sort of bold things that it's attempting to do to demonstrate, but also try to discover on its landing site. This is genuinely a very, very exciting mission.
It is cool, isn't it? Like, there's no way around it. There's on the bottom of this giant car-sized rover that we somehow planted on the surface of another planet without smashing into it at thousands of kilometers a second.
That's the hard bit.
Kind of have done before, right? On the underside of this, we've got a helicopter strapped to it that Perseverance is going to very gently put down. They're going to drive away, and we're going to attempt to fly a helicopter on a different planet. And it's not like some dude's going to be sitting in NASA headquarters with a remote control, right? Because that's not technically feasible. So this is AI-driven flight.
Well, this is it. So all of the Mars rovers have been effectively remote control, that we command them what to do from Earth, write a set of instructions, beam it to them with radio dishes, and they pick it up with an aerial and then carry out their instructions, carry out their tasks for the day. But because Mars is so far away from Earth, you've got something like a 20-minute time delay in each direction. It's not like you are live driving a remote control car like you could do on Earth. So the set of instructions are effectively downloaded to the robot every Mars morning. It carries out its to-do list for the day. If it hits any problems or anything unexpected, it will kind of shut down, send back an error code back to Earth saying, not sure what to do here, guys, let me know. And the fact that you're therefore coding the robot on a day-by-day basis, sending up the instructions in Mars morning, getting all of the data and the imagery and the stuff back the next time it can create a radio uplink at Mars sunset, people working on these rovers end up having to live and work on Mars time, not wherever they happen to be living on Earth. And because the Martian day is something like 40 minutes different to that on Earth, you effectively get a increasing time shift between you working on Mars time, getting up on your flat, driving into the laboratory or wherever it is you're doing your Mars science to get the data back down from Perseverance. You're shifting 40 minutes each day. It's almost like you're getting a sort of jet lag, but from another planet that happens to have a different day length. So there's all these sort of operational considerations that the NASA team of scientists and engineers working on Perseverance that have to take into account.
Yeah, it's the things you don't think about, like, and that sounds really almost underestimating. Like, I get it's hard to work a rover on Mars, but you don't think of the other aspects, like Mars's rotation being different to ours, its day and its night being different to ours.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Mars atmosphere is very, very different as well. It's incredibly low pressure, very thin air on the surface of Mars. It's equivalent to being something like 100,000 feet up on Earth. So very, very low atmospheric pressure on Mars. And so the idea, therefore, of sending a drone, a helicopter to Mars and trying to get it to operate in that incredibly low atmospheric pressure is itself an incredibly difficult thing to do. And so what Ingenuity, what this robotic drone is going to need to do is have its rotor spinning incredibly quickly to generate enough thrust, enough lift to be able to take off on Mars, even considering the fact that the Martian gravity is lower than Earth's gravity. You've got really up against the thin atmosphere as a problem when you're trying to fly there.
I remember reading about this when I was setting up for this interview, and it was thousands and thousands of times a second, like phenomenally fast rotation speeds. But that makes sense. I hadn't considered the fact that, of course, Mars's atmosphere is so thin.
Not only very thin, but it's almost entirely made up of carbon dioxide. So if you were to go to Mars as an astronaut, maybe hitchhiking lift with NASA or perhaps Elon Musk, and then accidentally forget to take off your spacesuit helmet when you're having a stroll around on Mars, you would die very quickly on the Martian surface, not only because the atmospheric pressure is so low, but because there's no oxygen in the air anyway. And one of the other experiments that the Perseverance rover has got on board is very exciting for that reason, because when we do want to start sending humans to Mars on exploration missions, maybe even start colonizing other worlds, we're going to have to make air for them to breathe when they get there. We're going to have to make breathable oxygen. And one of the experiments on board Perseverance is called MOXIE, which is an acronym for the instrument, which is going to suck in CO2, suck in carbon dioxide from Martian air, run the chemistry to convert that and to produce oxygen gas from Martian air. So it's a proof of principle experiment to demonstrate how we could keep humans alive, at least from the point of view of creating atmosphere they can breathe, by running that experiment for real on the Martian surface with Perseverance. So Perseverance is very much a stepping stone to much more exciting and greater things coming along on the horizon now.
Its landing spot has been incredibly carefully chosen. We didn't just slap this thing on the side of a giant red ball. It's where it is very key to its mission, right?
Yeah, so when you're trying to explore another planet, trying to explore Mars, by not sending humans, we're not sending ourselves as explorers, we're sending robots. And imagine trying to explore an entire world, an entire planet, by landing in just one place at a time, having a look around. But because the range of these rovers is measured in sort of kilometers, imagine trying to get a feel for the whole of the Earth by getting to look in only one place and walking around sort of kilometer or two in any one direction. So we're trying to understand the entire planet by looking only one place at a time. And therefore we want to be extraordinarily careful and considered in how we choose where to send our rovers and our probes to. And the landing site that Perseverance recently touched down into is called Jezero Crater. And the reason that Jezero is very, very exciting itself, the reason it was picked after a very long process of considering lots of different possible landing sites, is there's very clear evidence that Jezero once hosted a lake of liquid water within it, that the bowl, the basin of the crater was once filled up with a lake of liquid water, so called a paleo lake. And what we can actually see in the satellite imagery of Jezero is a river delta. So just like the Amazon or the Nile River flowing into the sea, that river carries lots of sediment in its flowing water. And as it flows into the static water of the lake or the sea, all that sediment deposits, it gets dumped down underwater to build up these deltas and sedimentary fans into the water body. And that's what we can see in Jezero. Not only was there a lake there, but there's a river, flowing water, bringing in sediment, bringing in river mud. And that is thought to be one of the best places we can think of to search for signs of life. It's one of the places we'd find ample evidence of life if we got to check on Earth, and in that muddy sediment in the bottom of a river or a delta sediment in the lake. And so that is what Perseverance is going to be exploring, going to be driving over.
Signs of life on Mars. Like, we have a long-running bet, you and I, who's going to have this giant achievement first. And your side of the bet is finding life on Mars. So what are the odds? Like, honestly, just among us friends quietly, what are the chances that Perseverance is going to find something that's, oh my God, this is it, proof of life on Mars?
Well, clearly, I think that the odds of finding life beyond the Earth, the odds of finding bacterial life on Mars, are good enough that I'd be willing to devote my career, devote my working life to this as a question, something I'm interested in, but something I clearly think is a realistic prospect to see fruition. It's not a waste of time and effort. And the reason that astrobiologists like me are this confident is from all we have come to understand about life on Earth and the extreme range of conditions that simple bacterial life can tolerate, that the so-called extremophiles or extreme lovers, the hardy life forms on Earth, they tell us that places like Mars seem to have had a habitable environment, that they could have had life of their own, bacteria of its own on the surface of Mars. And we're also getting much, much better at finding trace relics, trace fossils of life on Earth in very harsh, inhospitable environments. We've got very good training at how we might find something similar on the surface of Mars by using something like the Perseverance rover. But whilst I've said all that, I still want to be cautious as to whether Perseverance rover, this one particular mission, will find overbearing, unambiguous, ironclad proof of life on Mars is perhaps unlikely. And what we would ideally want would be to bring samples of Mars back to the Earth, find some choice bits of Mars rock or Mars river delta sediment, Perseverance exploring Jezero crater, bring that back to Earth with what's known as a Mars sample return mission, and then be able to scrutinize those samples with all the best evidence on that evidence. And again, this is what Perseverance is one of the crucial stepping stones in providing, is it's going to cache some of the samples it recovers on Mars. It's going to package up, basically put in its backpack, and then store it, save those samples for a subsequent mission, which will retrieve them and then launch them from Mars all the way back to the Earth. And it's that Mars sample return mission that will have the best likelihood of giving us some kind of solid answer about whether there is or has been life on the surface of Mars.
I'd just like to point out it's a very good way of not giving me a definitive answer for yes or no. But I do get the caution in giving an answer to that one, because I forget the quote who it was by, and you'll tell me, I'm sure. But there was this someone science communicating physicist who said something along the lines of either there is life out there or there's not. And either way, the answer is mind-blowing. Something quite along those lines. Because it is, isn't it? Like there's something under that rock when you turn it over, or there's just nothing there. And either way, that's a crazy result for us to discover.
If anything, you might be surprised to not find life on Mars. All we've understood about how Earth-like the Martian environment was when Mars was much younger, much warmer and wetter, that perhaps if we don't find life on Mars, that starts to tell us that maybe the origins of life on Earth was a very unlikely thing that happened here, but not on Mars. So the discovery of life on Mars is more important than finding only one other example of life. It now starts telling us about the probability of finding life on any planet, and therefore how common life might be across the entire galaxy, orbiting other Earth-like planets around all these other stars you can see in our night sky. So it's much more important than just this one other example.
Because this is your area of expertise, isn't it? You mentioned extremophiles earlier. You mentioned this idea of finding life anywhere you look on Earth. This is what you do, and this is why you're relevant to Mars rovers. This is your research, isn't it?
Yeah, so my research is within astrobiology. I work with different extremophiles and the sort of conditions they can survive under. I've spent a lot of time thinking about radiation resistance, so some of the most radiation resistant organisms on Earth. We work with bacteria like Deinococcus radiodurans, which can survive a radiation dose thousands of times higher what would kill a human or many other kinds of cells. Because the surface of Mars is also bathed in very high levels of radiation from outer space, the so-called cosmic rays. So the sort of life that would need to survive on Mars today would have to be cold resistant, desiccation resistant, being able to survive being dried out, and probably quite radiation resistant as well, because the surface of Mars is not protected from those things. So that's what my research has been looking into, as well as what biosignatures of these extremophiles you might expect to be able to find using different techniques like Raman spectroscopy, infrared spectroscopy, different experiments the scientists use to detect trace amounts of organic molecules or signs of life.
So you say the surface of Mars, but surely therefore could we look underground perhaps?
Yeah, exactly. So the very surface of Mars has been utterly nuked. There's no hope of finding anything alive right on the surface, the way you might find life on the outside of a rock on Earth, like a touch of lichen or something. There's no hope of finding that on Mars, principally because the ultraviolet radiation from the sun is so intense. Mars doesn't have an ozone shield, an ozone layer to protect the surface from ultraviolet radiation. But the UV is absorbed in very shallow depths of dust or sand or material. But these cosmic rays can penetrate meters of solid rock, that very energetic radiation particles. And so not Perseverance, but the European Space Agency's next mission called ExoMars, which is landing a rover called the Rosalind Franklin rover. For all these reasons, this next generation rover has been designed and built with a drill which is 2 meters long and is going to be able to get a substantial distance underground on Mars, and therefore hopefully find material, perhaps with organic molecules that have been preserved and protected until now from that radiation, and hopefully even with biosignatures, with signs of life in it as well.
So is that the plan for Rosalind Franklin and ExoMars, to land it in kind of like a wet-like environment like Perseverance, and then dig, and then fingers crossed, find something really interesting?
That's exactly it. Both Perseverance and Rosalind Franklin will be landed in paleolake environments, places where there seems to have been extensive evidence of aqueous processes, liquid water-driven processes on primordial Mars, because without exception on Earth, life needs liquid water. So we're looking not only for habitable environments that could support life, i.e. places where there is once lots of liquid water, but also places that are good at preserving that life if it ever did exist. And that's why we're interested in things like deltas and sediments of river mud, because that will have concentrated material from a wider area dumped it down and then protected and preserved any signs of life that might have gotten in there.
So let's have another crack at an earlier question, because I'm keen to see if I can pin you down on this one. Fingers crossed, ExoMars goes okay, Rosalind Franklin lands, no harm, no foul there. What are the odds? What are the odds you think, putting it out there so we can look back in 2 or 3 years' time, that either you find some incredibly hardy bacteria 2 meters down, stuck to the bottom of a rock, still hanging on for dear life, or more conservatively perhaps, you find some sort of fossilized biosignature relevance thing, whatever that would be?
I mean, it is a good question, and I'm not trying to wheedle my way out of it for the sake of it, but it's a question that you can't answer until you've done the experiment. You can't know the probability of finding something that you've not yet discovered until you discover it. It might be quite a high probability of life having got started on Mars. It might be quite a low probability. At the moment, we have only one example of life having got started, which was on our own planet, and therefore we can't make any deductions at all about how likely that is to have happened. Even if life was really unlikely to have happened on Earth, the fact that we're here and looking back our own history, surprise, surprise, life got started on Earth. We can't draw any conclusions from that about whether life is likely on Mars.
Professor Lewis Dartnell, you're a great scientist, and it's a fair summary of the point. I yield you that. Oh, brilliant. Unfortunately, that's probably about all we have time for. That's our half-hour chat, which we target.
Let's chat again come next year, when ESA's next rover, ExoMars, the Rosalind Franklin rover, will launch in 2022. And then, like Perseverance, will take 6-7 months to fly across space from Earth to Mars to then land. So we can touch base again then and look back and see what Perseverance has discovered and talk about ExoMars and what will be new about that mission.
Well, at risk of extrapolating from limited data, as you've warned me about, 2 conversations for this podcast, 2 lockdowns, and some very long hair for both of us. So fingers crossed, chat 3, we will be in a different place for that. Thank you so much for your chat today, Lewis. It's been brilliant.
Cheers, Brad. Thank you very much for having me on again.
If you've enjoyed today's podcast, feel free to subscribe, whether you're watching us on YouTube or if you're listening to the audio version, whichever audio service you found us on. You can find us on iTunes, Anchor, Spotify, or all the usual suspects. My name's Bradley Elliott, and this has been today's Different Conversation.